Hi, welcome to Community Empowerment. I'm Roberta Martin, your host. Today I want to talk about a topic that is very sensitive. And it's very sensitive because people have ignored to talk about it. But I think it's very important that we talk about it. And tonight's topic is going to be racial profiling. And it's just a part one of what we want to talk about today. Today in the studio with me is the Chief Executive Officer, David Singleton. Welcome to have you this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And so we're just going to dive into what racial profiling really means. And so without much spending time, I want you to just directly go into the topic and just, in your own understanding, what does racial profiling mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I want to do is the legal terminology is it refers to the targeting of individuals based on not behavior, but on their person's race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, and it's illegal for law enforcement to profile somebody based on those characteristics. However, all profiling is not illegal. And so we're going to talk about some of the things, the differences between permissible profiling versus not impermissible profiling.
Excellent. So would you say that we have this kind of description, we have that going on in the Twin Cities here in here in Minnesota?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Minnesota is not any different than some of the other states. I think most states have that problem based on our research and analysis. But specifically in Minnesota, we do have that. A lot of times, you see it in some of the smaller jurisdictions a little bit more, than you see it in some of the bigger cities because the bigger cities are more diverse. And so it stands out more in the smaller cities.
Okay, let's break down some of the low level offenses that we see going on, because I came across this data that says that driver license violations, trespassing, disorderly conduct, loitering with intent to prostitute or deal in drugs are the very low offenses that police arrest people for. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? What is your opinion?
Well, I think those offenses that you've brought up, I think a lot of them are tied to social economics. Those are low income economic crimes. They're quality of life crimes, and that's why they're tied to minorities because of the disenfranchisement of minorities. So those are some of the quality of life crimes, and that's actually where policing should start with some of those because it can grow into bigger problems.
And so you mentioned minorities. Why did you think that was very important? I mean, you didn't include other race, but you just mentioned minorities. Mm-hmm. And so are you saying that the target is just on minorities?
No, I'm not saying the target is there, but when you're in a certain economic class, then there's certain offenses that correlate with that economic class that you're in, and because of the disparity that we have and that we see in the minority community, undereducated, not employed, and then you have those type of crimes that come out of that of that lifestyle. You don't have. I mean, it's somebody who's employed making $80,000-$90,000 a year. You typically don't see them being charged with that type of crime. So that's why I say that economics has a lot to do with the level of crime that somebody is charged with and where it originates from, and there's a lot of background to that too. So,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Star Tribune, I came across this research that in May 2015, the Star Tribune said that blacks are 9 times more likely to be arrested for minor crimes in Minneapolis, and that people of color are more likely to be arrested for low-level crimes. You know, the low-level crimes that I mentioned about, like loitering around and with the intention of prostitution. You know, so low-level crimes in Minneapolis compared to the white counterpart, according to the detailed study that was released Thursday of thousands of arrests made by the city police. Now, this research is coming from a report from the Star Tribune back in May 2015. And so in 2004, the Council of Crimes and Justice also found that the racial gap for these low-level offenses was nearly twice as large as it is now. So I think that there are changes, but let's talk about the problem. Let's back up a little bit and talk about what I just said, because 2015 is, I mean, we are in 2015.
Yes.
You know, and this report came in May from the Star Tribune. So these are very, you know, professional research, you
Yes.
know, and I mean, this data is coming from something that you can really go back and search, okay? So if just in May 2015, they are saying it's 9 times more, blacks are 9 times more likely to be arrested as compared to white counterpart, it's a little bit of a concern.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a big concern because, like I said, the method in which law enforcement uses that is impermissible, it violates a person's constitutional rights. Now, that doesn't mean that that these things are not happening, but we have to find out why they're happening. You know, we have to find out the you know, what's leading up to that. I mean, why is it that it's just a certain ethnic background that's seems to be getting charged with these low-level crimes, and it's not whites or it's not other people. So, you know, I think we need to get to the core of the problem in order to stop the illegal activity that's going on.
Right.
Now, part of that is also going to be better training and different training for the police departments.
So, you know, I know that so this is a part one, okay, and we're going to go more in details into this. But if you had mentioned a few minutes ago that it means that there are reasons behind that, let's just talk about, in your opinion, what do you think could be the reasons? I mean, just, you know, superficially, you know, what do you think could be the reasons why? And so you're using the word target. Is that what you are saying?
Well, that's another way of saying it. You're targeting a certain individual based on what they look like, what they're wearing, versus their behavior or some intelligence that you've received, and you're following up on intelligence. So that's, you know, so like I said, there's one that's legal and there's one that's illegal.
Okay.
And I think some officers were brought up in communities where there was no diversity
Okay.
in their own life.
Okay.
And so when they come to bigger cities like Minneapolis or St. Paul, they really don't know the community that they work in.
Okay.
And so therefore they're going based on their own experiences when they encounter people. And so sometimes that can lead to illegal racial profiling. Some officers don't live in the areas that they serve in, and, you know, which I am against. I mean, I think that if you're going to be an officer in a certain city, I think you need to live in that city. Some departments do have that requirement, but a lot of them don't. So they come into Minneapolis and they work, and then they go, you know, 100 miles home, you know, to a totally different environment.
So you think that this could be some of the reasons, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. I want to talk about some of the low-level crimes. So let's look at loitering, for instance, you know, when you're loitering around. I mean, explain the word loitering.
Well, loitering is when you're let's say if you're at a grocery store, a little corner store, and you're just hanging out. I mean, you're not purchasing anything. You're not you're not doing any business there. You're just kind of hanging around, and that's loitering.
So must loitering be, I didn't know that loitering is a federal offense, you know. What if I just maybe don't live by myself, you know, and don't have much to do, and I just decided to just take a walk, you know, by the grocery store, maybe Cups, and just walk around the area. So with the description of what you said about loitering, that means that I could be arrested for just walking around that area.
Well, loitering it's not a federal offense. It's on the local level, and it's another one of those quality of life crimes. Let me give you an example. If you're going to the grocery store and let's say you have your child with you, and you're getting ready to go up to the store and you see this guy just hanging around, and I mean he just doesn't, you don't feel comfortable. Well, that's bad for business.
Right.
Because I mean you could turn around and leave and decide to go someplace else, because I mean who's this guy that's just standing here in front of this door? A lot of times they're asking people for money, and you know, but also it's not loitering unless the owner or the manager doesn't want them there. I mean, now if they permit them to be there, then they're there legally.
So so that means that police officers are trained to have some psychological profiling to really understand the behavior of a person that is loitering around if they have a bad intention. You know, to be able to say that, well, their intention is to arrest or something. I think there's a graphical representation about loitering arrest in Minneapolis, and on the graph I see that majority of the people, see, you can see on the graph, the majority of people that are arrested for loitering constitute black race. Okay, so what can you say about that?
That goes back to our socioeconomics. It goes back to being unemployed and underemployed.
Okay.
And like I said, a lot of times, you know, people that are hanging out like that in front of establishments are, you know, they're usually panhandling too, asking people for money, and you know, hustling. You know, they may have, you know, stole some things from a store and they're trying to sell them to people when they're coming in, and you know, those are that low income crime that you get from.
Okay, so to be able to solve the problem, you have to go back to the, to solve it, we have to go back to the root of the problem.
Yes.
So if you mention about you are not working, if you're busy working and you're busy doing something with your life, you won't be loitering around. And if you're loitering around, then what is your intention, right?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there is loitering with intent as well. Because now I gave you the example on private property, but if you're on public property and you're loitering, that's where you get loitering with intent to what? I mean, you know, are you going to break into somebody's house?
Okay.
Are you going to rob somebody? Are you going to carjack somebody? I mean, you know, and so therefore the police are able to, you know, they can give you a ticket. They usually give you a ticket for loitering. They can't arrest you for it.
Sure.
But loitering can also lead into bigger crimes.
Right. Okay. Well, so let's look at another low crime that I have in mind, disorderly conduct. You just have a disorderly conduct. Explain that, please.
Disorderly conduct, well, that's disorderly conduct. It basically is when you are out of control.
Out of control.
I mean, that's a simplified meaning of it. Now, I've also seen fifth degree assault called disorderly conduct.
Okay.
You know, which
and that's that graphical representation again. You know, with the blue signifying, you know, the white race, and then the red signifying the black race. Again, disorderly conduct. More blacks are arrested than blacks. So the disparities is pretty large.
yes.
Okay.
Well, and I think that comes from the attitude I think that that minorities have in general towards law enforcement. You know, when an officer stops you and you know, and talks to you about something, automatically that person already has a fear, you know, has a bias, you know, I mean, against the police.
Right.
You know, I mean, because they think that they're there to harass them and cause them problems, and so right away they go from 1 to 10, you know, I mean, in a couple of seconds.
And then before you know, it's
And then before you know it, you know, you've gotten yourself into a bigger problem than what you originally had.
right. Another big issue is the marijuana arrest. That is a big issue there, and I think that there will be a graphical representation. So marijuana, I know. Let's talk about marijuana, and let's talk about, you know, what do we think about it when, in terms of, I mean, what is the scale of what what is the scale of that? I mean, based on what is it? Is it a certain amount, or, you know, you arrest on marijuana, would it be based on a certain amount, or what?
Well, it's possession is
Right.
what you're talking about. Possession of
Possession.
marijuana.
Yeah. So even if you possess just a little amount, or is it specific amount? Is it a specific amount that, you know, if you have in your possession, you'll be arrested, or what? Or is it just because you have it?
Well, for example, I mean, if you're you have users, you know, which smoke marijuana.
Right.
A lot of times a user will have maybe, you know, a joint or a couple of joints with them. Normally the police don't arrest you for that. You know, I mean, they'll take it and destroy it and you know, send you on your way. But if you have a bag of marijuana, you know, they have them in dime bags and quarter pounds, and, you know, they have them categorized as far as the amount of marijuana that they have. Then, you know, you're going to go to jail for that. I mean, if you're in possession of that.
And majority, so let's talk about whether it's a black person in possession of marijuana or a white person. The data, the graphical representation here shows that with the same, I mean, product, some races are arrested more and given more crime time compared to other races. So let's say I arrest you for, you know, 10 pounds of marijuana, and you happen to be, you know, a white person. I would just say, well, you're going to do what, maybe 3 weeks time in jail, and if it happened to be a black person, then you're going to be in there for 3 years or something like that. I mean, can you explain on that?
Yeah, and we'll explain a little bit more of the background of that in Part 2 series, but
Sure.
I know that President Obama just ordered a release on minorities that had been incarcerated for possession of marijuana just recently. And there is a disproportionate amount of blacks and minorities that are given more time for possession of marijuana versus a white person who would possess that. And then it's also the type of drug that it is too. You know, it seems to be that marijuana favors more of the minority community versus meth.
Oh,
You
let's
know,
explain. This is the first time I'm hearing meth.
Yeah, I mean, meth.
It's the methamphetamine.
Methamphetamines tends to be more a you know, more of a person of Caucasian background tends to be favored more with that drug, the manufacturing, the selling of it, and then you have some other drugs, and we'll get into the more specifics, like I said, in the Part 2, so that the viewers can kind of understand the background of that and see exactly why that is, that, you know, that you have some ethnic backgrounds that are more, you know, some of it has to do, you know, back again with the economics.
Economics.
Marijuana is less expensive than cocaine. You know, and sometimes it's just simple economics. I mean, people that are making $100,000 a year, I mean, can afford to buy cocaine, where you have somebody else that's either underemployed, unemployed, you know, and they can buy marijuana for, you know, $20, $30. See?
Well, I just want to read something I came across, and I know that this is a part one, so we just surfacing here. Here's what I came across when I was doing my research. And this is written by Susan Bu. Susan Du on May 29, 2015. That's not too long from here.
No.
And you can find what I'm talking about on citypages.com/news. So you go on your browser and then you type www.citypages.com/news. And the title is, "If you were black in Minneapolis, you are 9 times more likely to be arrested." I thought that was a very serious title there. If you were black in Minneapolis, you are 9 times more likely to be arrested. So as I was reading that, here's what I came across. In 2004, the Council on Crimes and Justice found that the racial gap for these low-level crimes that I mentioned earlier was nearly twice as large as it is now. So there has been some changes then. Back then, blacks were 15 times more likely to be arrested than white. So that tells me that there have been some changes. But if there have been some changes, their chief of police mentioned that it's a concern, and I quote, she said, "This is a concern." And if this is a concern, if we are saying that there have been some changes, and she is saying this is a concern, then that means some things need to be changed. Policies need to be changed, and training. What is your opinion?
Well, in all the above. I mean, you know, policy, training. I think training is a big one. You know, because there's officers are being trained to act in the manner that a lot of them act in. You know what I mean? And so now you do have a few of them that you know, the amount of what you might want to call bad examples is very few compared, because most officers are good officers, and they're doing the right thing, and they're trying to help people, and they're doing what they took their oath to do. But the few that are not doing that, it puts a stain on the whole department, because they're all wearing the same uniform. So if you have one officer that's not acting appropriately, then the community at large, I mean, they don't see that as just an individual thing. I mean, they see that as a more larger issue. As far as policy is concerned, that lies with the police chief in the departments, or sheriff in the sheriff's department, and they are the ones that have the authority to change their policy on how their officers interact with people and what they do for certain crimes, and some of them are mandated by the law to do certain things as well. I mean, some of them don't have a choice.
In the same data, Chief Inspector of Police, Ms. Hato, if I mentioned her name correctly.
She's the chief of police.
Chief of Police, right. And she had also mentioned that there's going to be some changes in policies.
Right.
Because she called it very concern. You know, she thinks it's a concern. And she mentioned changes and training and things that need to go across the board. But here's my concern. If we talk about blacks, we're talking about blacks from any type of race. So I want to talk about, you know, blacks that are coming from other parts of the world, people from the West African continent, the East African continents. I'm talking about Nigerians and Kenyans and Liberians and Somalians and blacks from all over the world that have come to the United States, you know. And, you know, when people come like that, they come with different cultural background. And so they may be arrested, and perhaps they may be doing something wrong, because they probably is not vested very well with it, you know, how things are done here. And so if we have so many, and Minnesota is becoming even more diverse with people, blacks from other parts of the world. So that means that we really have a big issue here. We got to go into culture, you know, and really, and people from African continent come from different cultural background. We may all come from Africa, or they may all come from Africa, but they are not the same.
Right.
You know, they speak different languages, they eat different things, you know, they believe in different things, you know.
Right.
And so that means that it's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
You agree?
I agree. And education
Education.
is going to solve that problem.
Right.
And it's not just race that encompasses this big problem. It's also, like you said, you know, national origin. It can be religion. You know, there's a lot of different reasons that these things happen. Now, what I want to do is I want to take you to an example here.
Sure.
First, what I want to do is I want to talk about the impermissible use that we had talked about earlier. Okay, now that term alone indicates that the definition does not prohibit reliance by law enforcement authorities on race, ethnicity, national origin, or religion. And it's aimed at law enforcement activities that are premised on the erroneous assumption that the individuals of a particular race, nationality, or origin are likely to engage in unlawful conduct. Okay, that's illegal. You know, you can't do that.
Okay.
So what I want to do is I want to just give you a quick example here. This is going to demonstrate how this would be applied in practice. Okay, a police officer who is parked on the side of a highway notices that nearly all vehicles are exceeding the posted speed limit. Okay, they're witnessing that all vehicles are doing that. Since the driver of each vehicle is committing a traffic violation, that would legally justify a stop.
Okay. Well, that is quite interesting. But we are out of time.
Okay.
And so I hate when we get to a point like this and we have to break because it's getting very interesting. And so I just like to tell the audience that we are coming back with a part 2.
Okay.
And so this is just part 1 of racial profiling. We're going to go very deep and deeper and even get on the national level because we have so much things going on the national level. We have the Trayvon Martin, we have so much going on. And I like to tell my viewers that I need you to call and come to the studio because we want to hear your opinions. We want to hear your experiences with stop and seizures. You know, we want to know what is your point of view concerning the topic racial profiling. I'll be waiting for your call, and we are looking forward to do that just next week. And so without much ado, I just want to thank you for tonight. And it's been wonderful having you. I have learned a lot, and I can't wait for part 2.
Thank you for having me.
With that said, good night.